I've been watching a whole ton of Godzilla films recently. They can range from fun, campy monster bashes to serious powerful pieces of art, which makes them perfect to throw on if I'm looking for something casual to watch. While wading through the sea of Godzilla films available to me one late night, I noticed that Godzilla Raids Again was on the Criterion channel. While I had always ignored it due to reading online that it was only a cash grab made to capitalize on the success of the first film, I felt a strange compulsion to give it a watch. So I did. And I was pretty surprised at how much I enjoyed it. So I'm going to talk about it for a bit since I have nothing else important to do. So here's a very brief history on this film. Godzilla Raids Again, directed by Motoyoshi Oda, was released only a mere 6 months after the first film. To call it a rush production would have been an understatement. Tomoyuki Tanaka, the producer and creator of the Godzilla franchise, seeking to capitalize on the success of the first film, gave the directorial seat to Oda due to the fact that Ishiro Honda, the director of the OG film, was busy working on another film titled Love Tide, a drama based on a novel by Hidemi Kon. Surprisingly, Tanaka notes that Honda would have been a director like Mikio Naruse if he had not pointed him to the kaiju genre. Not only that, Oda had experience in creating films with special effects, such as The Invisible Avenger, which seems to be an adaptation of the H.G. Wells story, much like the Universal Invisible Man. He seemed like a good fit for someone making a kaiju film. Unfortunately, the film released to supposedly pretty much negative reception by fans and critics alike. They saw it for what it was, a rushed sequel. Some would even call it a cash grab. Even the producer himself, Tanaka, said that the film was barely a success too. But despite all of that, I believe that there is some artistic merit to the film still. The original 1954 film is dreary, full of death, destruction, and suffering. For Godzilla Raids Again, it's somewhat tonally lighter, although it does try to replicate the sense of dread you get from watching the original. It is also the last film in the franchise to be made in black and white, and as such, it has a certain sense of etherealness to it that you can't really find in any subsequent film going forth, save for maybe Godzilla vs. Hedorah. Where the film shines is when Godzilla first appears. In order to get Godzilla to avoid destroying the city that our protagonists are inhabiting, a plan is proposed to switch off all the lights within it. So begins the standout sequence in the film, a completely blacked out city as flares are littered across the sky. Godzilla slowly rises out of the sea, and for a brief moment, it captures the tone of the original. Entire buildings are covered in shadow, civilians are evacuated, and radio reports are given out. All you hear are the droning of vehicles and even just silence at points, which can be rather unnerving at times. While this doesn't last throughout the entire film, it does give a glimpse at how the production team did try to create something akin to the original, albeit with limited effect. Most of its dread is lost after this sequence, and not even a creepy suit can have to return any of it by the time the final set piece comes in. But it's the closest in imagery you can get to the original film, down to the gritty details in black and white. If you don't already know, this is the first Godzilla film in which a lovable kaiju fights another kaiju in a brawl to the death. While the sped up footage might look pretty comical in nature, there is a certain charm to seeing this very prototypical, early stage of what will become the normal formula for Godzilla films going forth, save for those who retell the original film in their own way. So here comes Anguirus, the very first enemy kaiju in Godzilla history. You can tell they were still experimenting with suit designs at this point, as you can clearly tell that this is a suit piloted by a dude on all fours. It doesn't really look particularly intimidating from any angle, though his determination to beat up Godzilla is at least admirable to say the least. The miniature work is excellent throughout this entire fight, and it still holds up today too. A wide variety of buildings are destroyed as they tear each other apart throughout the city, and my personal favourite is the flooding of a metro station that almost looks like the real thing. Real impressive despite the technological limitations of the time. It famously ends at Osaka Castle, where Godzilla brutally executes Anguirus in a rather animalistic fashion, gnawing his neck before double tapping him using his atomic breath. As he walks off satisfied with his kill, the film cuts to Osaka on fire, looking like an image from Hell made manifest. The same scene will also show up decades later in a film about a god incarnate, wreaking havoc on Japan once more, echoing perhaps the same sentiments of nuclear fear, framed under a different light. I'm of the belief that a good kaiju film must also have good human characters, and while Godzilla Raids Again isn't anything special on that front, it does try to create a bit of melodrama between our core cast of characters. Focused on two pilots, Soichi and Koji, who work for a fishing company in Osaka, as well as Hidemi, the daughter of their employer, the film pretty much relies on these three characters to drive the plot forward. The chemistry is pretty okay, it's nothing to rave about, but the romantic subplot between Soichi and Hidemi does tug at the heartstrings a bit. You do genuinely want to see them get together for real, and I consider that a success on the emotional front at least. If any of this sounds familiar, it might be because that -1 seems to also have a loosely similar core cast of characters too, though in completely different contexts. Perhaps there was some inspiration taken from Godzilla Raids Again, and I wouldn't be surprised if there were more parallels somewhere. That's my brief rundown on Godzilla Raids Again and its certain merits. I strongly suggest you give it a go, since it is a landmark film in the franchise when it comes to defining it fully. Tune in next time to see me talk about a cyborg who just doesn't know when to quit being angry.